Hi, friends. I am back again. I hope everybody has had a really great week. We've had Saturn go direct recently, so hopefully the energy is reviving and we're feeling new inspiration and a little bit more connected to our goals because Saturn in Pisces for the last almost 3 years has been pretty crazy. But I'm very happy to be out of that. And as we come out of that, I feel like I've been thinking a lot about creativity and, purpose and mission and the energetics behind all of that. So I wanted to talk a little bit about that today. Um, Kind of like open the conversation and just hear from everybody's perspectives, things that they've experienced. But I was thinking today a lot about like the whole concept of turning your life into your art. Because I think that, especially if you're listening to this, a lot of us are the types of people who've been separated from having a normal life for a very long time. We've been going through massive, especially in the last like 7 years, just very massive death and rebirth cycles over and over and over again. And when we think that we finally have made it through the tunnel, another cycle opens back up again, and we've just been going through that a lot. So this will resonate with you if you feel like you resonated with the visionary video that I made last, because a lot of us who came to this earth, who are walking this archetype of being the visionary, and we're really on this earth to create, and you feel like you were meant for something big, and you've always felt that. You felt that you were meant to create something and birth something into the world that's bigger than this old paradigm, to help usher in a new paradigm, a new way of doing things, and a way that can help bridge our collective consciousness to something that is more powerful, more abundant, and more rooted in truth. If all of those things apply to you, then hopefully this conversation is something that you can resonate with. But yeah, I was thinking a lot about the concept of turning your life into art and how you go from being maybe the person who, was born or raised rejecting their gifts into really accelerating and ascending into the version of you that becomes this like energy generator who can really put in like a ton of this energy and a ton of these creations out into the world and really become somebody who's impactful. But but in order to be impactful, you have to be somebody who has gone through a lot of inner death and rebirth, right? Because that's how you really connect with that creative force inside of yourself. And so I think the first step in really stepping into your fullest creative form and fullest ability to show up as the newer, more evolved version of you that has gone through many initiations, that has spent time in the darkness, that has gone into the hermit mode and has come out of it. The first step in coming out on the other side of that is first understanding sort of the energetics of your body. And I guess like the topic as a whole is really stepping into the artist's way, right? Like that's a book. I haven't read the book yet, but I really think about the whole purpose of or the process of really coming into your inner artistry and how it's connected to the way that you're wired, because a lot of us are not wired in quote unquote normal traditional ways, right? So your energetic body, as somebody who's creative, a visionary, energy generator, think of your body as this like massive powerhouse of energy, and you just like take in tons of information, whether it's from the people directly around you, whether it's from the collective consciousness, whether it's even from your past or things that are actually actively happening inside of you right now. You're very sensitive to it, and you pick up like insane levels of information that it's probably beyond your conscious level of understanding, right? Like this is a very subconscious process. So you pick up a lot of information, and the ultimate goal of preparing your body for a creative life is to get to a place where your body can take all of that information and then transmit the energy outwards, right? So you can take in all of this information and all of these, emotions that are floating around in the collective unconscious, ideas, feelings, experiences, traumas, and you can turn it into something that can really help other people then inspire themselves and kind of awaken seeds of different things that have been dormant within themselves, right? That's the goal. But it takes a long time to get to that place, because you have to essentially find a balance between being a receiver of energy and then being a transmitter of energy. And likely in your earlier life, because of feeling like an outcast, because of trauma, because of just social conditioning, you're going to feel constantly that you're not enough. And so those feelings of not feeling like you're enough, the traumas, the inadequacy, the fear of being seen, all of these things cause you to become kind of emotionally constipated, where all of the information that you're taking in becomes stuck in your body, and you don't really have the channels open enough and enough practice in order to like know how to transmit that outwards and be a full alchemist, right? And so, for a long time, we're going to be going through training periods and initiations, these inner cycles of death and rebirth that are preparing us for that, right? In order to be the type of person who can energetically hold tons of information, which if you're on this path, or sorry, not information, light, but same thing, light codes, etc. But if you're on this path, you're watching this video, you likely are somebody who is built for that, right? And in order to be somebody who can really hold a lot of light, not only from themselves, but be able to take in the information from what the needs of the collective are, so that you can give something back to the collective that the collective needs. In order to be that type of person, you have to be able to process really high levels of energy. And so that's what your awakening is really preparing you for. When you're going through those dark nights of the soul, where you're processing like literally lifetimes and ancestral lineages and collective layers of pain and trauma, just know that it's preparing you for a level of capacity that you might not be aware of right now, but you will come into that when you come out on the other side of it, right? So it's really about building this depth and this capacity, but you have to understand the energetics behind that. Otherwise, you're not going to really understand like, why am I experiencing so much pain and depth and darkness in my life? Like, that darkness is really building a depth inside of you, so that you have the capacity to hold a shit ton of light and to be able to emit that outwards. So that's like the first thing, is just like understanding your own energetic makeup, and that your body is meant to take in lots of information, lots of information. That's why you feel hypersensitive to everything. That's why sometimes when you're in situations with a lot of people, you're actually not picking up on your own. You think that some of the things that you're feeling are just you being hyperactive in terms of your nervous system, but it's actually you're picking up the fear and anxieties and the unspoken truths of other people, right? So understand how you work energetically, because that's really going to help you move through the process and find purpose in these cycles that you go through. Because as a creative, you're going to go through cycles of being a hermit and going through those cleansing periods of really excavating the depth inside of you and understanding new truths and insights, understanding where the collective is headed, right? By first going through that shift within yourself. And then you can come back out into the world in your expression and really take what you have seen, take the journey that you've been on, and share it with other people, so that the people that are also within your collective, that are also on a similar path, can take that as inspiration and hopefully use it to elevate their own path themselves. So that's step number one. The other thing is, I think that a really important thing to recognize is, a lot of times when you're on this path, you've felt since you were a kid that you had a really big energy inside of you. And this was probably all happening on a subconscious level, because kids obviously can't reason through all of this, but you probably understood at a young age that there was something really big inside of you that doesn't fit into the smallness of the world. And so you learn to shrink yourself, right? You essentially learned that you were too much, and that you had to quiet your intelligence. You had to quiet the power of your voice. Maybe you were very beautiful and you learned to, walk around and water down your beauty because it was offensive to other people. Maybe you're just very charismatic and you learned to kind of like hide in the shadows because other people got very offended by it, right? Like, at a young age, the gifts and the genius that we're given at, we learn to shrink it because it causes so many reactions and projections from other people. But that's a really key thing to understand, is that the projection that you experience in your life is actually proof of how impactful you are, right? The fact that your very presence can make people feel so deeply, sorry, burp, maybe that's a confirmation burp. The fact that your presence can make people feel so profoundly is proof in and of itself that you are a very powerful, impactful, and influential person. I need you to get that down your throat and in your brain because it took me so long to really understand that. I just assumed that me walking around as the person that I am triggering people left and right just meant that something was wrong with me. But the concept that in order to be a quote unquote successful or impactful or powerful person means that everybody has to like you is also part of the indoctrination, right? Like, because if we are under the guise that we have to make ourselves be liked in order to be impactful, then we're going to water ourselves down, because the only way to get everyone to like us is if we water ourselves down. So that whole thing is a lie, and you have to throw that out the window, and you have to be comfortable with the duality, because somebody who is truly powerful and impactful, you're going to kind of like polarize people, and you're going to have extreme um, responses to your energy. So people are either going to feel really activated, very inspired, very connected by you, or it's going to be the opposite, where people feel like, you just exist and people like react to you, or they kind of pull their energy back, or they kind of reject you, right? So you're going to have really polarizing experiences, and it's really important that you don't take the negativity and just internalize it. But getting back to the original point that I was making, a lot of us knew that we had this big energy since we were very, very young, since we were kids, and we learned to shrink ourselves, and we learned to believe that we were too much. And you have to realize that that bigness is that creative force inside of you trying to be seen, and that the more that you shrink yourself, the more that you're actually gonna, ironically, the feeling of too much turns into feeling like you're not enough, because then you start shrinking yourself, and when you shrink yourself, you feel disconnected from your authentic self. And when you feel disconnected from your authentic self, you start to feel like I'm not enough, right? Like you feel cut off from life force energy, you feel cut off from abundance, you feel cut off from the unity consciousness experience. And so ironically, when you try to make yourself small and you feel like you're too much, you end up converting into the flip side and feeling like you're not enough. And so in order to step into your fullest creative capacity, you also have to release that idea that you were too much, and realize that all along you might have thought that you were not enough, but at the root of that, underneath that not enoughness, is actually the feeling that you were too much, because you've always known that you were big. You've always known that you were meant for something really, really profound. And that is the very reason that you developed all of these different defense mechanisms and all of these different, habits that have kind of put you in the corner of your own life. So those are all like super important things to recognize when it comes to the process of learning how to turn your life into art. And when you are able to get through all of that, when you're able to, number one, prepare your vessel energetically, when you're able to, number two, process your wounds, but the core wound being that feeling of being too much, which also comes with the fear of being seen and the fear of vulnerability. But I think all of that comes from the fear of being too much and the fear of rejection. And also when you recognize the power of projection and realizing that projection is not a bad thing, right? Projection is the byproduct of art. Art is supposed to make you feel, and we are human beings. We don't just only feel good. So I think all of those different pieces kind of help you to get to a place where you can ground yourself in your life path and start to feel like your creative endeavors actually have meaning. And you also have to realize that when you start to live in your creative life, you're going to, when you climb up a mountain, there's going to be less people that you meet along the way the higher up you go. And so when you're on your creative path, you're going to really release and reject and cut off a lot of people just naturally without even trying. A lot of people that don't resonate with you, but as you put more out there, you will create a community, and you will find those people that understand your language and that understand your art, right? Like when you put yourself out creatively, when you use your voice, people who have the capacity to hear your words will find you. When you put out your, actual art and like your physical art, people who have the eyes to actually see your vision will find you, right? Like you have to have trust in that, and you have to actually want it too, because you have to get to the point where it's like, I don't want to be around this fake shit anymore, right? I want to be around people and experiences and environments that can actually fit who I am. I want to be in a room that's big enough to hold the capacity and the fullness of who I am. And in order to do that, you have to show people who you are, so that the other people who also vibe with you and feel your frequency and see your life path can find you, because otherwise, how are they supposed to know that that's who you are if you're not showing that that's who you are? And I think also like this channel is kind of proof of that, because I just started this channel so that I could practice speaking, and being comfortable being seen. And also just like for myself, it was more of just like an exercise to get over the fear of being seen, and also practice like learning how to speak, and like gather my thoughts, and it's so cool because I've just seen like so many people commenting and following and like sharing their experiences and saying that they relate and that they're like inspired by these videos. So it's just amazing. Like it's so amazing what can happen when you actually believe in the bigness of who you are, when you actually accept that you're meant to live this creative path and not the linear one that we're sold, and when you just surrender and when you let go of that fear of being seen and the projection. So yeah, I guess that's my little rant today. But maybe you can use this as inspiration to put yourself out there in a creative way, no matter how uncomfortable it is and no matter how big or small it is this week. And tell me how it goes. I feel like we could all use a little bit more um, self-expression. It's very healing and very transformational for the soul. But yeah, that's all I got today. Have a fabulous weekend and be sure to comment and share some of your experiences or things that just came up as you were watching this. Bye.